90% of people who suddenly acquire $50 million are completely broke within 5 years. And it has nothing to do with bad investments or bad luck. What destroys them is hardwired into your brain. It activates the moment that money hits your account. Most people never see it coming. 9 out of 10 lottery winners end up broke, in debt, or financially worse off than before they won. That's not a rumor. That's a pattern backed by decades of financial research and court records. And today, we're breaking down exactly why it happens and the one psychological shift that separates the 10% who keep everything. Let's talk about what happens the moment you win. Within 48 hours, most winners receive calls from people they haven't spoken to in years. Cousins, old classmates, distant relatives who suddenly remember your birthday. The social pressure to share is immediate and overwhelming. Studies show the average lottery winner gives away or loans out more than $2 million in the first year alone, often to people who will never pay it back. That's before you've paid a single financial advisor. Here's the first open loop I want you to hold. Later in this video, I'll show you the one constraint that the surviving 10% all share, and it's not what any financial advisor will tell you to do. In Act 2, you hire the help. You find a wealth manager. You diversify across real estate, a restaurant your brother-in-law always wanted to open, and a few stocks your cousin read about on Reddit. It feels like responsible behavior, but here's what's actually happening inside your brain. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill, the documented tendency of humans to return to a baseline level of happiness regardless of major positive events, including winning the lottery. Within weeks, your brain recalibrates. The 50 million no longer feels like 50 million. It feels like your new normal. And your new normal demands a lifestyle to match it. You buy the house. Then you need furniture. Then you need staff. Then you need a second house because the first one is too far from the city. Every purchase feels justified because the account still looks big. But withdrawals compound faster than any interest rate can chase. Most lottery winners spend more than 30% of their winnings in the first year. On a $50 million prize, that's $15 million gone before year 2 begins. That spending rarely slows down because the identity has already shifted. You're now someone who owns a yacht. Yachts need crew, insurance, and maintenance costing more annually than most people earn in a lifetime. The identity drives the spending, not the other way around. The second psychological trap is what researchers call sudden permission. For most people, dozens of desires, the sports car, the vacation, the business idea, have been suppressed for years purely by lack of money. The lottery removes every financial constraint at once. And when all those suppressed desires get permission simultaneously, the brain doesn't prioritize. It floods. Winners don't buy one car, they buy 5. They don't take one vacation. They charter a private plane to 3 continents in 8 months. The spending isn't reckless in the moment. It's deeply rational to the person experiencing it, because every purchase was a dream they'd earned the right to fulfill. One charter flight to Europe runs $40,000. 3 continents in 8 months is over $100,000 in flights alone, before hotels or experiences. The math is brutal even when each decision feels perfectly reasonable. Now let's talk about the advisors, because most winners do hire them, and most still go broke anyway. The problem is the type of advisor they hire. The wealth management industry is built around assets under management fees, typically 1 to 2% of your portfolio per year. On $50 million, that's $500,000 to $1 million a year in fees, regardless of performance. And because these advisors are compensated by portfolio size, their incentive is to keep you happy and spending, not to preserve capital. Many steered clients into complex investment products and private equity deals that generated high commissions while delivering mediocre or negative returns. The winner feels cared for. The money is quietly eroded from 2 directions simultaneously: spending and fees. Before we get to the exact playbook that the 10% use, I need to show you one more layer of the trap. Taxes. In the United States, a $50 million lump sum lottery payout, after federal withholding of 37% and state taxes averaging around 5%, leaves you with roughly $29 million. not 50. Many winners make financial plans based on the headline number, not the post-tax reality. They buy a $30 million estate before the check clears and then discover the math doesn't work. Some have literally had to sell the prize home within 2 years because they couldn't afford the property taxes on what remained. The gap between the perceived windfall and the real windfall is one of the most consistent destroyers of lottery wealth. Now here is the turning point. The 10% of lottery winners who actually preserve their wealth all share one behavior that sounds almost too simple. They do not touch the principal for at least 2 to 3 years after winning. Not one major purchase. No new home. No cars. They continue living their pre-win life while the money sits in a boring, federally insured account. The reason this works is psychological, not financial. When 2 to 3 years pass between winning and spending, the brain's initial euphoria, the flood of dopamine, fades. You begin to think like a steward of wealth rather than a consumer of it. Transaction costs and advisor friction become a welcome moat between impulse and action. The 10% are not smarter. They're simply slower. And in the world of sudden wealth, slow is the only strategy that wins. The survivors follow a 3-part playbook before they claim the ticket. First, they write down a spending rule, a hard cap on discretionary purchases, usually no more than 2 to 3% of the post-tax lump sum per year. On $29 million, that's roughly $580,000 a year, still life-changing income, but one that leaves the principal intact and growing. Second, they hire a fee-only fiduciary CFP, not a wealth manager, not a private bank relationship manager. A fee-only fiduciary is legally required to act in your interest and charges a flat fee, not a percentage of assets. The conflict of interest that sinks most managed portfolios is structurally eliminated. Third, they automate. They instruct the fiduciary to invest 80% of the post-tax windfall into a low-cost total market index fund, something like a Vanguard or Fidelity total market fund with an expense ratio under 0.1%, on a schedule they never manually touch. Out of sight, automatically compounding, untouchable by impulse. The math on this approach is staggering. Consider our protagonist, 29 million post-tax, 80% automated into index funds. That's 23.2 million invested. At a historical average annual return of 8%, in 10 years that becomes roughly $50 million, more than the original pre-tax prize. The remaining 20%, 5.8 million, covers $580,000 a year in spending for 10 years with room to spare. The windfall doesn't just survive, it multiplies. That is the power of structure over impulse, compounding over consumption. Here's the climax of this entire story. One documented winner delayed all major purchases by 18 months, automated 80% of their post-tax prize into a Vanguard total market fund, and retained a fee-only certified financial planner. 5 years later, they had $42 million intact, more than the post-tax lump sum they started with, plus $2 million in. Annual sustainable spending generated by returns alone. That is the exact inverse of a 90% pattern. Not luck, not genius. A written rule, a fee-only fiduciary, and an automated investment schedule they didn't watch. 3 decisions made before a single dollar was spent. That's what separates wealth that grows from wealth that evaporates. The average winner's net worth crashes to near zero by year 5. The structured winner's net worth climbs past the original prize by year 8. Same starting amount, 2 completely different outcomes driven entirely by behavior and structure. If you ever receive a windfall, a lottery, an inheritance, a business exit, a legal settlement, here's what the math says to do before you touch a cent. Write down 3 spending rules today, right now, before you have the money. Commit in writing to spending no more than 2 to 3% of the post-tax total per year. This one step alone eliminates most of the damage. Hire a fee-only fiduciary and only a fee-only fiduciary. Ask point blank how they're compensated before signing anything. If they mention assets under management, percentage of portfolio, or any commission structure, walk out of the room. Your best protection is an advisor whose income does not depend on the size of your account. and automate 80% into a low-cost index fund on a schedule you will not monitor weekly. Make impulsive action logistically harder than doing nothing. The 90% didn't fail because they were foolish. They failed because they were human, and nobody gave them a structure before the dopamine hit. You now have the structure. If this video changed how you think about sudden wealth, or made you think about your own financial habits differently, drop a comment below. What's the first rule you'd write down if you won tomorrow? And if you want more videos that break down the math behind wealth psychology, subscribe. We publish every week.